we know what the story has been all year. It's been the Boston Bruins, and it's still the story going into the playoffs. But what is really interesting, and I think is underappreciated by many, is that you can say what you want about Boston, but who's the second best team in the NHL? Because there are probably 12 teams right now who could wind up being second, and you shouldn't be at all surprised. You've got, what, a dozen teams that got 100 points this year. I mean, there is nothing between 2 and 12. Nothing. Couple of wins.
I don't disagree. I have great excitement for this. I've watched the Boston Bruins, as many people have, trying to figure out, as this incredible season that they put together went on, where and if there is a vulnerability. And it's really hard to find. I mean, you can nitpick and say, okay, well, their top two centers, Bergeron, Krejci, are, real veterans. And if, they might be susceptible to injury and go down, and who knows whether Patrice is how much he's going to play. But it's really hard to find vulnerability there. But you're absolutely right. There are some compelling stories. I guess what I noticed, though, is that the league that has loved to trumpet parity for quite a number of years now, especially since the big lockout, is not quite as even as it has been. I mean, there are some haves and have-nots, and the haves, those 100-point teams, the haves at the top are really good teams, and the other guys were gone really early.
Yeah. Same thing. That was the issue last year. Remember, in the Eastern Conference,
yeah,
you knew the 8 teams by Christmas time, and the other 8 teams, you knew who were going to miss the playoffs. And that's still, there is still a little bit of that, mind you. Teams like Buffalo and Detroit and Ottawa are a little closer, but it's one of those aspects. And the other thing, Jimmy, you talked about it. The league has done a really good job of heralding the Boston Bruins. And really, and relishing the fact that we have this super team right now. So it's almost like they want parity, and yet they're promoting, the possibility of a very special team.
Well, the disparity that we had in the past pre-cap years, there's always been an argument that is missed. That you need the superpowers, you need the villains. Like the Boston Bruins are either loved or hated, but they're known throughout the hockey world, just as the Yankees have been in the past, just as the Rangers used to be, the Maple Leafs. So I don't think it's bad for the league at all to have a team like this. And if they win, I guess it's expected and no one will be surprised. But deep inside, there's a whole bunch of people that think, geez, I wonder if there's somebody there can knock him off, and I'd love to see it happen. Somebody will challenge him, and the next 2 months don't go without some speed bumps and pitfalls, and they'll have theirs. I can't imagine that it's going to be clean sailing, smooth sailing all the way through, but there's no question in all of our minds that they're the favorite.
Well, they will be, but I think they'll be challenged in every step. In every single round, they will face a team that is probably good enough to beat them. They may not be as good, but they'll be, there'll be a few 6-game series, at least.
Probably.
I don't think. I'll be shocked if Florida wins a game. I really am. I'll be shocked.
But Florida isn't a 100-point team.
No, they're not. But
they're one of the bottom ones.
Yeah.
They just scraped in.
They just scraped in. I mean, whether it's Alex Lyon or Sergei Bobrovsky playing goal, I just don't see them providing competition for the Bruins. And as you know, Jim, and you've seen this over the years, you covering the league, a lot of this story is a story of endurance. And so, win your series quick, stay healthy, rest up, and get ready for the next one. And, that's what every team that thinks they're a favorite, and I'm not sure there are many things that actually think they're a favorite. Many teams that's what they're praying for, is let's get finished this series 4 or 5, and then we'll prepare for the next series and pray that it goes 4 or 5.
Right, because what happens in such a long season with 82 games, some of the teams this year actually had the luxury of resting a few guys in the last couple of weeks of the season, which is very unusual. Doesn't happen very often, but you enter the playoffs usually with a few guys that are banged up and you're not sure whether they're going to last very long. They could be gone in an instant. So you're right. It's in this battle of attrition. It's often who can stay the healthiest. And that's why it's part of the reason we love the first round of the playoffs. And I think collectively we all do it. It's the excitement of the spring. I think in the sports world, in my estimation, one of the most exciting things in sport is the first shift of the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs, because you'll watch every one of these games that happens in the next couple of days. And right after the anthem, the first few shifts, the first game of the first round will get to a level that these guys haven't been at all year. And it's just incredibly exciting. And then it settles in. And by the time you're watching the third round of the playoffs, the beards are longer, the eyes are droopy, and, the guys are sitting on the bench and they look like they're completely worn out. And that's why some of the later round of the playoffs aren't nearly as exciting as the first round, just because of the battles these guys have to go through.
Well, hold on now. I've done enough Stanley Cup finals as you have to know that by the time the fourth round comes in the Stanley Cup, we're exhausted.
Oh yeah.
We
haven't done anything.
And we haven't done anything. Just imagine what those guys have gone through and the mental and physical strain that to get to that point. I think that's another reason why the first round is so exciting. This is as close to healthy as we're going to see any of the teams at any time. When do you, in your opinion, when do you think you get the sense of the personality of a series? Is it, you talked about that first shift, but is there a game that you say, okay, now we know, in the boxing analogy, both guys have set it up for the first couple of rounds, and now we know where this fight's going to go?
I think it can happen in a couple of different ways. Like sometimes if you've got a dominant team and they win their first two games at home, for example, or a dominant road team that wins the first two games, you get a feeling, right? You get a feeling early that there's one team that's dominant. But I usually think you get into the guts of the series, like it's game 3 and 4. It's in that area where you're approaching the halfway mark in a series. Then you know how they match up. Then you know who's adjusted well, who's capable of making adjustments to turn the series, and who isn't. Mm-hmm. Sometimes teams are just, you can see they don't have a chance. And that usually doesn't happen early, but I think you need to, there's the excitement of watching the first couple of games, but I always felt that the most fun in terms of broadcasting the games and really trying to be involved in it was once you get into the middle of the guts, games 3 and 4 and 5, that's where the series could be decided. That's when you really saw who could win a matchup, who couldn't. All the little peripheral things that happen in a series that don't necessarily show all the time on the scoreboard, but make a huge difference in a particular game.
Do you think we put too much emphasis on home ice advantage in the playoffs?
Yeah, I do think we do, especially with the high quality teams we've had and what we've seen in the past. I do think that here's a couple of reasons why I think home ice advantage does make a difference. For a team like Boston, they've earned the right to play a team that didn't have 100 points. That makes a difference. They finished first. But I also feel like most teams would tell you, in fact, all of them, I'm sure, would tell you that if there's a game 7 in a series, you'd much rather have it in your barn, on home ice, than on the road. And that's what you earn. But a lot of the give and take, I think, Bob, in a series doesn't really matter, because the days have long passed where there was a building advantage because the ice surface was a little different, or there were quirks in different buildings, the old Boston Garden, Chicago Stadium, that sort of thing. They're all the same now. The facilities underneath are pretty much all the same. The guys live the same way, so it's not as big a difference. But I'll tell you what, I'd always be pushing to be first and make sure I had home ice advantage.